Over the last 24 hours, a major crack has just ripped through the US-Israeli coalition, and it's set off a massive chain reaction. We're talking military escalation, diplomatic chaos, and economic shocks all across the Middle East. At the very moment Washington was trying to hit the brakes, the IDF launched a surprise wave of airstrikes on Tehran. So we're going to break down exactly what just happened, why it's such a big deal from a strategic point of view, and where this incredibly dangerous situation is headed next. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the alliance itself, the strategic breakdown that kicked this whole crisis off. Then we'll dive right into the kinetic retaliation, the missiles, the strikes, the real military action. After that, we'll zoom out to the expanding battlefield, because this is spilling across borders. We'll also cover the global economic shockwave this is causing. And finally, we'll pull all those threads together to see just how close the region is to the brink of a total war. Okay, so let's start at the very top, with the highest strategic level. This is where the whole mess from the past day really began. A fundamental and very, very public disagreement between Washington and Tel Aviv. And it created this incredibly volatile and unpredictable environment for absolutely everyone involved. And here you can see the problem laid bare. On one side, you have the United States trying to de-escalate. They announced a 5-day pause on strikes against Iran's energy grid, talking about what President Trump called productive talks. But at the exact same time, the Israeli Defense Forces did the complete opposite, launching a brand new wave of airstrikes right into Tehran. Now, from a policy standpoint, this isn't just a simple miscommunication. It's a public, deliberate split in strategy. The long-term fallout from this is huge. It tells your enemies that the alliance isn't solid, which gives them a chance to drive a wedge between the US and Israel. It also really undermines the credibility of American promises in the region, making other allies wonder if Washington can actually restrain its partners. And then, Tehran just threw gasoline on the fire. Instead of maybe grabbing onto the American offer as a way out, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, just forcefully rejected the whole story. When he called the talks pure manipulation and fake news, that wasn't just him talking. It was a strategic play. For people back home, it makes him look tough. For Iran's proxies in the region, it's a signal that they are not backing down. And for the rest of the world, it's designed to create chaos and mistrust, basically slamming the door shut on any chance for immediate de-escalation. So all that diplomatic chaos, well, it didn't stay diplomatic for long. It quickly turned into direct and devastating military action. Now we're going to dig into the tactical side, the hard numbers behind the attacks, and what happened on the ground in the last 24 hours. If you're looking at this as an international security analyst, the thing that really jumps out is how methodical Israel's strategy is. This is not random bombing. The IDF has been systematically taking apart Iran's ability to launch ballistic missiles. And this number, 330 out of an estimated 470 launchers, that's a huge milestone. It means over 70% of Iran's main launch capability is now gone, either completely destroyed or buried in collapsed underground silos. This is a deliberate campaign to disarm their enemy's most dangerous weapon, and it's forcing a massive rethink inside Iran's military command. Now, we're seeing this dramatic drop in the sheer number of missile launches from Iran. It went from 90 just 5 days ago down to only 16 today. And at first glance, you might think, wow, Israel's campaign is working perfectly. But this data is a little deceptive. Iran isn't giving up, they're adapting. To an analyst, this screams a strategic shift away from quantity and towards quality. They're saving their remaining and probably more advanced missiles to get the most impact, instead of just trying to overwhelm defenses with a ton of rockets. It's a classic military adaptation when your back's against the wall. So where is all that precision being aimed? Well, look at this. Of the 16 projectiles launched in the last day, 14 of them were ballistic missiles pointed directly at Israeli population centers. Only a couple of drones were sent toward the Gulf. This data shows a really clear, deliberate decision by Tehran. Forget the other regional players for now and focus your most powerful punches directly on Israel. It's a calculated message to show they're still in the fight, even with a battered arsenal. And here's the devastating real-world result of that precision strategy. A concentrated volley of missiles hit the southern Israeli cities of Arad and Dimona, which are uncomfortably close to the Negev Nuclear Research Center. These strikes caused a mass casualty event, with around 200 people wounded. It completely overwhelmed the local hospitals, like Soroka Medical Center. And the choice of target, that's its own strategic message. A clear and very dangerous signal aimed right at Israel's most sensitive national security site. But the damage wasn't just around Dimona. A totally separate strike hit Tel Aviv with indiscriminate cluster munitions, injuring another 15 people. And that strike in Arad, That involved a heavy warhead that slammed right into residential areas. But here's the part that's really critical. Israel's Home Front Command is saying they are under severe strain, and the Air Force is now investigating a major failure. Its multi-layered defense shield, including the famous Iron Dome, somehow did not stop that heavy warhead that hit Iran. That suggests a potential vulnerability in a system everyone thought was nearly unbeatable. And you can be sure all of Israel's adversaries are paying close attention to that. Okay, so as you can probably guess, this direct fight between Israel and Iran was never going to stay contained. It is spilling over into neighboring countries fast, firing up a complex, multi-front shadow war that's being fought through proxy forces all across the region. And then, in a really big move, the United States jumped back into the kinetic fight, but not in Iran. A U.S. drone strike hit a command meeting of the Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, out in Iraq's Anbar province, killing 7 key fighters. The PMF is one of Iran's most powerful proxy groups, so this signals a strategic decision by Washington to fight Iran indirectly by taking apart its valuable regional network. And as you'd expect, the PMF has already sworn revenge, which raises the threat level for all U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. Meanwhile, up on its northern border, Israel's running this methodical campaign to dismantle Hezbollah in Lebanon. And this is way more than just trading rocket fire. They are systematically crippling the group's ability to fight through targeted airstrikes in Beirut by capturing high-ranking operatives and by destroying key bridges. This whole campaign is forcing Hezbollah to abandon its go-to supply routes, which severely hurts its ability to keep a fight going. So let's zoom back out from the tactical battlefield for a minute, because all these military actions are triggering immediate and severe consequences for the global economy. It's hitting energy prices directly and putting massive pressure on international supply chains. You can literally see the market's anxiety in the price of oil. Brent Crude spiked to a shocking $119 a barrel as the conflict heated up. Yeah, there was a tiny dip when the U.S. announced its pause on the hope of a deal, but that hope vanished pretty quickly when Tehran denied any talks were happening. It's a perfect example of how sensitive global energy markets are right now, reacting instantly to every military move and diplomatic whisper. And that kind of volatility affects everything from shipping costs to the price of food around the world. And the reason for all this volatility? It really comes down to one thing: Iran's economic trump card, its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is a critical chokehold for global energy. And now it's reportedly heavily mined and basically impassable for Western shipping. By shutting down this artery, Iran can cause huge economic pain to the rest of the world without ever firing a missile at a tanker. It turns the global economy into a weapon, putting immense pressure on countries in Europe and Asia that depend on that energy to push for a diplomatic fix. And this isn't just numbers on a screen anymore. The global supply chain is officially starting to crack. Slovenia has just become the first EU nation to start emergency fuel rationing, a direct consequence of the Hormuz blockade. It's the first real, tangible sign that the economic fallout of this regional war is hitting everyday consumers thousands of miles away. And analysts are now watching very closely to see which larger European economies will be the next to face similar problems. All right, for our last section, let's talk about the endgame scenarios. We're at a point now where military threats are becoming existential. And at the same time, any path to a diplomatic solution seems to be freezing over and closing fast. This is a terrifying new step up the escalation ladder. Iran's military command has issued an absolutely chilling ultimatum. We're not just talking about a threat of conventional war anymore. They are threatening ecocide, the irreversible destruction of all Middle East water, energy, and desalination plants. This is a threat to make entire regions literally uninhabitable by destroying the systems that provide drinking water to millions of people. It's a desperate, horrifying threat aimed right at the U.S. and its allies, basically a threat of environmental, mutually assured destruction. And as these military threats are getting more intense, the diplomatic channels are just freezing solid. Like we saw, Iran publicly blew up the U.S. story about talks. In another sign of things getting worse, the U.K. just summoned the Iranian ambassador over escalating espionage charges. And all the while, the clock on that 5-day U.S. pause is ticking down, and there's still no clear diplomatic way out of this. So this puts Washington in a really, really tough spot. From a policy perspective, it's a nightmare. When that 5-day clock runs out, what does the U.S. do? Do they follow Israel's more aggressive path and start striking again, which could trigger Iran's ecocide threat? Or do they hold back, which would create an even bigger, more public split in the alliance with Israel? There are absolutely no easy answers here. and whatever they decide will impact American foreign policy for years to come. And then you have to ask yourself about Iran's side of this. With over 70% of its main ballistic missile launchers gone, Iran is bleeding militarily. This is forcing them to rely more on older, less reliable weapons and their proxy forces around the region. Now, that could be a critical weakness, or it could make them even more unpredictable as they turn to other tactics like terror attacks or cyber warfare to try and level the playing field. The key takeaway from the last 24 hours is just the sheer number of moving parts and volatile factors that are all in play at once. You have military escalation, economic warfare, and a diplomatic breakdown all converging. The risk of a catastrophic miscalculation, a stray missile, a signal that gets misunderstood, political gamble that goes horribly wrong is now unbelievably high. A single misstep could set off an uncontrolled, region-wide war that nobody wants, but nobody seems to be able to stop. And all of this leaves us with the most critical question as we look ahead. The diplomatic options are disappearing, economies are starting to crack under the pressure, both sides are making existential threats. So what comes next? What's the final rung on the escalation ladder when threats of ecocide are already on the table and all the other options seem to be exhausted? That's the question that the entire world is facing tonight.